It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when a 71-year-old widow from Ohio sat down at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee and opened her banking app, just as she had done on the first Tuesday of every month for years. Her name was Margaret. She had always been careful with money. She never spent beyond her means, paid every bill before the due date, and kept enough savings to make sure she would never become a burden on her family. A few years earlier, after a minor stroke made it difficult for her to drive across town, she added her oldest daughter to her checking account. It seemed like the responsible thing to do. If an emergency happened, someone she trusted could pay her bills or withdraw cash if she couldn't make it to the bank. For 2 years, everything worked exactly as planned. Then one morning, Margaret logged into her account and froze. Her balance was nearly empty. More than $38,000 had disappeared. She immediately called the bank, convinced there had been some kind of fraud. Instead, she heard something she never expected. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the representative said. "The withdrawals were made by a joint owner on the account. Legally, those transactions were authorized." Margaret wasn't arguing that her daughter had access to the account. She simply never realized that giving someone access also meant giving them legal ownership. By the time she understood the difference, her savings were gone. The bank couldn't reverse the withdrawals. The police couldn't treat it as theft. Her attorney explained that under the account agreement, the money legally belonged to both account holders. Margaret didn't lose her retirement because of a hacker. She didn't lose it because of identity theft. She lost it because of paperwork she barely remembered signing. And sadly, Margaret isn't alone. Stories like hers happen quietly every single day across America. Most people don't hear about them until they happen to someone in their own family. That's exactly why I wanted to make today's video. My name is Clare Maynes, and if you're new to this channel, welcome. Every week I break down the financial rules, banking changes, retirement updates, and practical strategies that can help older Americans protect the money they've spent a lifetime building. If that's the kind of information you value, take a moment to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an important update. My goal is simple: to help you stay informed before small decisions become expensive mistakes. Now let's get started. If you currently share a bank account with anyone, a husband or wife, an adult child, a sibling, or even a trusted caregiver, there are 3 important banking realities you need to understand today. Many people assume these accounts work one way, when legally they often work very differently. Banks don't always explain every consequence in plain language, and most customers never read the lengthy account agreements they sign. Unfortunately, that's where costly misunderstandings begin. Financial experts estimate that billions of dollars are lost every year through financial exploitation involving shared accounts. In many cases, the person responsible isn't a stranger. It's someone the account owner already trusted. That may sound surprising, but it highlights an important lesson. Trust and legal ownership are not the same thing. You can trust someone completely and still expose yourself to financial risks you never intended. The first thing every account holder needs to understand is this: adding someone to your account doesn't simply give them permission to help. In most cases, it makes them a legal co-owner. That single distinction changes everything. Many people believe they're simply allowing a son or daughter to write checks if needed, pay utility bills during a hospital stay, or help with banking errands. But once a joint account is established, both owners generally have equal rights to the money inside it. That means either person can withdraw funds, write checks, transfer money, or close the account, depending on the account agreement and state law. The bank isn't deciding who earned the money. The bank only recognizes who legally owns the account. That's why understanding today's first rule is so important. Rule number 1: your joint account may override your estate plans. This surprises families every year. Many people spend months preparing a will, carefully deciding how their savings should be divided among children or grandchildren. Then, without realizing it, one joint checking account changes everything. Here's an example. Imagine Robert, a retired teacher, has 3 children. His will clearly states that everything should be divided equally. Years before his passing, however, he added one daughter to his checking account so she could help manage monthly expenses while he recovered from surgery. His intention was convenience, nothing more. When Robert passes away, the checking account doesn't automatically become part of the estate. Instead, under many joint account agreements with rights of survivorship, ownership transfers directly to the surviving account holder. The daughter listed on the account becomes the legal owner of the entire balance. The other two children receive nothing from that account, even though the will says the estate should be shared equally. Family disagreements like this happen far more often than people realize. Everyone believes they're following their loved one's wishes. Yet legally, the bank follows the account agreement, not necessarily the instructions written in a will. This isn't about banks trying to be unfair. It's simply how many joint ownership agreements are designed to work. That's why estate planning professionals often encourage people to review every financial account, not just their wills. An outdated account designation can undo years of careful planning. There's another reason this matters. Many people assume the paperwork they signed years ago is still exactly the same today. In reality, banks periodically update account agreements, disclosures, and customer policies. Not every change affects ownership rights, but many customers never review the updated documents they receive in monthly statements or electronic notices. As a result, they continue using an account without fully understanding its current terms. That doesn't mean every bank has changed ownership rules, but it does mean you should never assume your account works exactly the way you remember. If you haven't reviewed your joint account agreement in years, now is an excellent time to request a current copy. It takes only a few minutes, but it can answer questions that may affect your family's future. And here's something I'd like you to think about. If something unexpected happened tomorrow, would your savings go exactly where you intend them to? Or are you simply assuming they will? That one question has prevented countless families from making costly mistakes. Because in many cases, the biggest financial risks aren't hidden. They're simply misunderstood. In just a moment, I'll explain the second rule, a rule many retirees never see coming because it has nothing to do with inheritance. Instead, it involves someone else's financial problems becoming your own. And for many families, that's where the real trouble begins. Before we get to that second rule, I want you to do something very simple. Think about every checking or savings account you currently have. Now ask yourself this question. Who else has their name on those accounts? Not who has your debit card. Not who knows your PIN. Not who occasionally helps pay bills. Whose name is actually listed as an owner? You might be surprised how many people can't answer that question with complete confidence. Some accounts were opened decades ago. Others were updated after a medical emergency or following the loss of a spouse. Life changes, but paperwork often stays exactly where it is. That's why reviewing your accounts every year is just as important as reviewing your insurance or updating your will. Now let's move to the second rule. Rule number 2. A joint owner's financial problems can affect shared money. This is one of the least understood aspects of joint accounts. Most people naturally think this way. I earned the money. I deposited the money. Therefore, it's my money. Emotionally, that makes perfect sense. Legally, however, a jointly owned account can create situations that are much more complicated. Here's an example. Linda spent more than 35 years working as a registered nurse. She retired comfortably and lived on a combination of Social Security, a pension, and the savings she had built over decades. When arthritis made it difficult for her to drive, she added her adult son to her checking account so he could help if she ever became sick. She trusted him completely. For several years, nothing seemed unusual. Then her son experienced serious financial trouble after a business failed. Bills piled up, collection notices arrived. Creditors began pursuing repayment. Although Linda had never missed a payment in her life, she suddenly found herself dealing with unexpected complications involving money she believed was entirely hers. She hadn't created the debt. She hadn't signed the business contracts. Yet because their finances were connected through a joint account, Resolving the situation became far more stressful than she ever imagined. Stories like Linda's remind us that when two names appear on one account, financial events affecting one owner can sometimes create unexpected challenges for the other. That's why professionals often encourage families to think carefully before choosing a joint account simply because it seems convenient. Convenience is valuable, but understanding the legal relationship is just as important. There's another situation many retirees don't think about until it's too late. Imagine you need long-term care in the future. Perhaps after a serious illness or injury, you apply for assistance with nursing home costs or other medical benefits. Part of that process often involves reviewing your financial history and the assets connected to your name. Shared accounts can sometimes make those reviews more complicated than families expect. Again, every situation is different, and the exact rules depend on federal and state laws. But the important point is this: a decision made years earlier for convenience may have consequences you never anticipated. That's why financial planners frequently recommend reviewing account ownership whenever major life events occur. Marriage, divorce, retirement, the birth of grandchildren, the death of a spouse, or a significant health change. Those are all moments when your banking arrangements deserve another look. Now, I'd like to pause for just a moment because I want to ask you something. How many years have you had your primary checking account? 5 years? 20 years? 40 years? Leave your answer in the comments below. I read as many comments as I can, and it's always interesting to see how long some of you have stayed with the same bank. You know, many people are incredibly loyal customers. They've banked with the same institution for decades. They know the tellers by name. They trust the people behind the counter. And that's a wonderful thing. But trust should never replace understanding. Even the best financial relationships deserve an occasional review. That's one of the smartest habits any saver can develop. If you're finding today's information helpful, I'd also appreciate it if you took just a second to click the like button. Doing that tells YouTube this information is valuable, which helps more retirees and families discover these videos. And if someone you love shares a bank account with an adult child, a parent, or another relative, consider sharing this video with them as well. Sometimes a 5-minute conversation today can prevent years of regret later. Now, we've covered how joint ownership can affect inheritances. We've also discussed how another person's financial difficulties can sometimes create unexpected complications. But the third rule is the one that concerns me the most. Because it doesn't require a lawsuit. It doesn't require creditors. And it doesn't require bad intentions when the account is first opened. Instead, it involves something much more common, changes that happen slowly over time. Memory loss, scams, financial manipulation. And the simple fact that once someone has legal access to an account, stopping a problem quickly isn't always as easy as people assume. In the next section, I'll explain why this has become one of the fastest-growing financial risks facing older Americans and, more importantly, the practical steps you can take this week to better protect the savings you've worked so hard to build. Let's talk about the third, and perhaps the most important rule. Rule number 3. Once someone has legal access to your account, reversing a problem can be extremely difficult. This is where many families are caught completely off guard. When most people hear the word fraud, they picture a stranger sitting behind a computer somewhere across the world trying to steal passwords or credit card numbers. Banks have become very good at spotting many of those situations. If your debit card is suddenly used hundreds of miles from home, your bank may freeze the transaction. If someone attempts to log into your account from an unfamiliar location, you may receive a security alert within minutes. Those systems are designed to recognize suspicious activity from outsiders. But a joint account works differently. When a withdrawal is made by someone whose name is legally on the account, the bank's system often recognizes that transaction as authorized. After all, the person making the withdrawal is an account owner. From the bank's perspective, they have the legal authority to access the funds. That creates a serious challenge. If money is transferred out of the account by a joint owner, recovering those funds may become far more complicated than many people realize. Consider the story of Harold and Susan. They had been married for nearly 50 years. Like many couples, they shared everything, including one checking account where their retirement income was deposited every month. As they grew older, Susan began experiencing mild memory problems. At first, they were easy to dismiss. She occasionally forgot appointments or misplaced her reading glasses. Nothing seemed particularly alarming. Then one afternoon, she received a phone call from someone claiming to work in the bank's fraud department. The caller sounded professional. He knew her name. He knew the name of her bank. He even knew the last 4 digits of her account number. He warned her that criminals were trying to steal their savings and explained that the safest solution was to move the money into a secure account until the investigation was complete. Wanting to protect the family's savings, Susan followed the instructions. Within an hour, tens of thousands of dollars had been transferred. By the time Harold discovered what had happened, the money was already gone. The bank investigated the case, but because Susan was a legitimate owner of the account and had personally approved the transfer, reversing the transaction became incredibly difficult. Neither of them intended for this to happen. They weren't careless. They simply became victims of a convincing scam. Unfortunately, criminals have become remarkably sophisticated. They can spoof phone numbers so they appear to come from your bank. They can create emails that look almost identical to official communications. Some even use artificial intelligence to imitate familiar voices, making scams more convincing than ever before. That's why protecting your money today requires more than simply choosing a strong password. It requires creating systems that make it harder for anyone, including scammers, to take advantage of a moment of confusion or distraction. The good news is that there are practical steps you can take. Let's go through 5 of the most important ones. Step 1. Review every joint account you have. Don't rely on memory. Pull out your account statements or log into your online banking. Write down every account you own and every person whose name appears on each one. Ask yourself a simple question. Does this person truly need to be a joint owner today? If the answer is no, it may be time to explore safer alternatives. Step 2. Request your current account agreement. Many people are still relying on paperwork they signed 10 or 20 years ago. Policies and account disclosures can change over time. Call your bank and request the most recent version of your account agreement. Take the time to understand exactly what rights each account owner has. Knowledge is one of the best forms of financial protection. Step 3. Consider alternatives to joint ownership. If your goal is simply to allow someone to help manage your finances during an emergency, ask your attorney or financial professional whether a durable power of attorney or another legal arrangement may better fit your needs. In many situations, these options allow someone to assist you without automatically becoming a co-owner of your money. Every family's circumstances are different, so obtaining personalized legal advice is always worthwhile. Step 4. Separate everyday spending from long-term savings. Some financial planners recommend maintaining one account for monthly bills while keeping long-term savings in a separate account. This approach can reduce the amount of money immediately accessible if problems arise and makes unusual transactions easier to notice. It also creates an additional layer of organization that many retirees find helpful. Step 5. Review your statements every month. This may sound simple, but it remains one of the most effective habits you can develop. Don't just glance at your balance. Look through the individual transactions. Do you recognize every withdrawal, every transfer, every automatic payment? If something doesn't look familiar, contact your bank immediately. The sooner questions are asked, the easier many issues are to investigate. Finally, ask your bank whether they offer a trusted contact service. This allows you to designate someone the bank can contact if they notice signs of possible financial exploitation or unusual activity. A trusted contact cannot access your money simply because they're listed. Instead, they provide another layer of communication that may help identify problems before they become devastating losses. As we wrap up today's discussion, I want to leave you with one final thought. Most financial losses don't begin with a dramatic event. They begin with a small assumption. An assumption that someone will always act the same way. An assumption that paperwork still says what it did years ago. An assumption that because nothing has gone wrong yet, nothing ever will. Those assumptions can be expensive. The account you opened years ago may still be serving you well, but it's worth taking an hour this week to make sure it still reflects your wishes, protects your savings, and supports the people you love. Review your account ownership. Understand your rights. Ask questions. And don't wait until a crisis forces those conversations. A little preparation today can prevent enormous heartache tomorrow. If you found this video helpful, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever reviewed your joint account agreement? Or is this something you plan to do after watching today? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for spending a few minutes with me. I'm Clare Maynes, and I'll see you in the next video, where we'll continue helping you make smarter financial decisions and protect the future you've worked so hard to build.